So in this session, I'm going to talk about Introduction to Azure Functions. Believe me or not, but it is an easiest way to build your application and a quickest way to go to market. So before we get started with today's session, let me talk about myself. So I'm Chetas Patil. I work at Zscaler as Senior Software Engineer. I've been working with all the CSP, mainly the Azure, AWS and GCP. And currently I'm working with .NET and Golang. I've also been working with the graph databases, and I have most of my experience at scaling the services. So let us talk about the agenda now. So we'll start our session with what are Azure Functions, then why there is a need for Azure Functions, how can I get started with it, then how to create Azure Functions using .NET, and then once we have created Azure function, then how to deploy it, how to use it. Then there are some extensions of Azure functions like what are durable functions, and after that we will see like how it integrates with other Azure services. So let's begin the session. So now let me talk about what are Azure functions. So before understanding what are Azure functions, let us try to understand what is serverless. So Azure functions are based on serverless only. If we understand serverless, we will understand Azure functions. So serverless is a development model that enables the developers to build and run their applications without having to manage the infrastructure part of it, or without having to manage the servers. So serverless doesn't mean that there are no servers. So behind the scenes, servers still exist, but the way it is abstracted away from you, it feels like it is a serverless. You don't have to care about the servers. So the servers part is actually taken care by Azure for us, and we just have to focus on our code. So that's why the most important part for our developers is to develop their application, package it, and run it. And that is what Azure Functions enables us to do. So that means it can accelerate our development because we don't have to care about the infrastructure anymore. We just have to care about our code. That's it. And then we are good to go. So before serverless, we used to spin up a virtual machine. We used to add a load balancer. Then we used to check whether the virtual machines are enough to handle the particular load at the particular time. So this is like what we used to do for initially. But serverless has taken entire infrastructure from us. Now Azure function or Azure takes care of the scaling part. We just have to develop the application and deploy it, and that's it. We are good to go. Again, there are a lot many integration that become very easy once we have this serverless way or the Azure functions. One of the examples, if I can give is like let's say you want to integrate your Azure functions with Kafka or a messaging queue. Now it is available on a single click for you. Initially, we used to add a separate package for it. Then we used to configure a separate infrastructure for that. And then we used to run our entire application. But now it's just a single click away from you, and which accelerates the development more, right? So this is why Azure functions are getting more popular these days with the serverless trend that's going on. So now let us talk about why you should definitely consider using Azure Functions. First point is very less code to write. Definitely, if you took look at the integrations, it is very easy to integrate. There is no extra packages that is required. It's like very easy to integrate. And then if we look at the deployment part as well, previously we used to deploy the virtual machine, the load balancer, and other infrastructure. So we used to write a deployment code for the infrastructure. But now you have to just write a deployment code for the Azure function. That's it. Second thing is scalable. Definitely scaling is one of the biggest question that arises when you deploy your application. Initially, you don't know how much scale you're going to or how much request you're going to receive. So the best thing is that give it to Azure Functions. Let Azure Functions manage the scaling for you. You just manage your code. You just manage your business logic, what is required for the user, and rest of the stuff let it be managed by Azure only. So how it scales, like I'll just give you a brief idea about it. So scaling comes when let's say a user is using application, you have got a request. Now that request needs to be processed. So Azure function will spill up one instance of Azure function. So the instance will be actually take your request and it will process your request. It will send a response back to the user. Similarly, if let's say if there are hundred or thousands of users that are using your application, now Azure will actually look into how many requests you're getting, and based on that it will try to spin up more instances of your Azure functions. So let's say there are 10 instances that are running of the same Azure function that you have deployed. Now this 10 will distribute the load that is coming from your thousands of users. Like this, it can scale up to 200 instances. So you get a scalability as well. You have to maintain very less infrastructure because now you don't have the servers, you don't have the other stuff, right, to manage. So definitely just a single Azure function. That's it. Cost saving. Now, when you initially before serverless or before Azure functions, if you try to deploy your application, so there is always one virtual machine that is alive, that is looking for the requests that are coming from the user. Now let's say your application is not used for 5 days, but now you have to pay the cost for virtual machine, right? Because the virtual machine is running. So in this case, how Azure Functions cut down the cost is, let's say you haven't got a request for past 5 days, it will not spin up any instance. So your instance count will be zero. And what cost you have to pay? You have to pay zero cost because there is no virtual machine that is allocated to you. It will be allocated only when you receive a request from the user. Until then, the instance count will be zero. And the cost is just for the compute that you're using. Since your function or the instances are not running, so there is zero compute that is getting used. That's why the cost goes to zero when there is no request. When you get a request, only the time till get computes, let's say 1 minute or so, you have to just pay cost for that 1 minute. That's it. So that's why it's cost saving as well. Early go to market. So previously you used to deploy virtual machines and other infrastructure that is required. Then for scaling you used to manage it for security patches. Then you have to run the vulnerabilities tools on top of it, and then you have to check whether the server is properly configured or not. Are there any loopholes? But this time has been reduced now. You have to just focus on your development part. Once development part is complete, directly you can go to market. So it's early go to market as well. So these are few points why I think so that you should definitely consider using Azure Functions. So now we will see like how can we get started with Azure Functions. So first thing is that we will create a function, we will write our code in Visual Studio, and then we will deploy the code that we have written in Visual Studio to Azure Function app that is in the Azure portal. So let's get started with the demo. So now we will create one application using Visual Studio, and we will use the Azure function template over here. So let's create a new project for it. And if I search for Azure function, so I'll get this template. I'll use this, click on next. We'll name it as Azure D, and then I'll click on create. So once we click on the create button, this pop-up will appear, which says you that create a new Azure application, and it lists down the triggers that are available for the function app. So let's start with the default trigger, that is HTTP trigger. So HTTP trigger will give you an endpoint, which once you hit the endpoint, the function app will get invoked. And similarly, there is a Cosmos DB trigger. Cosmos DB is a NoSQL database that is provided by Azure. And whenever you insert any document into Cosmos DB and you want a function app to be get invoked, so you can use this trigger. Blob trigger is also similar to this. So let's say Blob is part of storage account and you upload let's say an image to storage account and you want a function app to get invoked and process that image, so you can use the Blob trigger for that. Similarly, other triggers are available. You can explore this in the Visual Studio itself. So now I'll click on the create button. So once we click on the create button, this boilerplate code will appear over here, and we can see that this is a default HTTP trigger that we have chosen. If you have chosen Cosmos DB trigger or other triggers that are available, and you can see that over here. So now we get an HTTP trigger. It says that the method, do you want to use get, post, or both of them? So for now what we'll do is we'll just use the get method. So I'll remove this post, and then you can decide like what endpoint do you want for this particular function. So what I'll do is I want something like Azure D, and the prefix to this particular keyword will be the Azure function app URL. So if we combine both, we will get a complete URL. Again, we can see that this is the function name on top of it. Then there is some code over here. We will use this default code only. So what it does is, whenever you send a request to it, it checks whether there is something in the request body or that you are sending, and if there is a name into it, it will actually print the hello name. Otherwise, it will say that the HTTP trigger function app execution successful. So I'll just edit this method, and what I'll do is I'll use hello from Azure. I'll save it, and then what I'll do is I'll create a function app into the Azure portal, and then we will publish our code that we have written over here onto the function app that we will create. So let's go to Azure portal and create a function app first. So what we will do is now we will create a function app, and then we will try to publish our code that we have written onto this particular function app. So right now I am to Azure portal. If I just click on the function app, it will ask me to create a function app. Okay, so first thing that you have to do is you have to select a subscription over here. So right now I'm having a free trial subscription, which is default selected over here. If you have more than one, then you can select it, or you can type it from here. Then you have to select the resource group onto which you have to let's say the resources will get deployed, or the function app will get created. So right now I don't have any other resource group, so I'll create a new resource group. I'll name it as Azure Day. Okay. And then I have to give the function app name. So function app name, I'll give it as Azure function app. And what you are going to publish, you can select it over here. Right now we have a code which we are going to publish. So I have selected the code. Then next is Runtime Stack. So we have written our application into a .NET. So I'll just select .NET. But if you just look at other options you have, like Node.js, you can write your application in Python or Java, right? And then you can select a version over here, so you will get different versions of .NET. Then you can select a region onto which you want to deploy. Let's say East US, and then you can select an operating system over here. So I'll keep it as default, like Windows, and the plan type is also mentioned over here. This is the consumption plan onto which we are going to deploy our application. So this is so there are other plans available as well, like there are functions premium and app service plan. So what is the difference between consumption plan and the premium plan? So in consumption plan, your instances will scale down to 0 when there is no request or no activity from the user side. So if there are no requests that are coming in, your function app will scale down to 0, and you will not be any cost for that, because now your code is not getting computed. Second option is that but okay, before going to second option, let's try to understand this scenario that there are some issues with it. the boot time of the function app will actually cause some delay onto your user interface, right? So let's say there is a user interface which sends a request to backend. Now the backend instance is not yet ready. So what Azure Function app will try to do is it will try to spin up an instance and then it will try to process the request. But there can be a delay while spinning up the instance, right? So if you want to avoid this delay, what you can do is you can always keep one instance active, and that thing can be mentioned in the premium plan. In premium plan, you can say like, I want always one instance to be active so that whenever the new request comes in, there is no delay and I could directly process the request. So in consumption plan, you don't have an option to select it, but in premium plan, you do have. Similarly, there is an app service plan as well that is used for running long-running applications. If I go to networking and then monitoring, so I just talk about monitoring as well. So in case of monitoring, you can actually log all your errors, or you can log the requests that are coming to your function app to a source called an application insight, which will give you all the details. And then you can create alerts or metrics, or you can also investigate like from where the request is coming in, how is application flow. There is a nice graphical view of the application flow. You can see like from where the request is getting generated, to which all Azure services this request is getting passed to, and how the response is again going back to user. All that things are visible in the application insights. So what we'll do is we'll create a application insights, and this will be the name for the application insight. Okay, so now I'll do what I'll do is I'll create this function. So you can see that it has initiated a deployment. So now it says that your deployment is complete. So I'll just click on go to resource. So this is our resource group where our resources will appear. Okay, so this is our function. I'm sorry. If I just go on to home, and then if I just go to resource group, so we'll say that Azure D resource group has been created, and within this resource group we have the resources that we wanted. So this is the Azure function app, and this is the application insights that is there, and this is the app service plan. So we have selected the consumption plan over here. So what I'll do is I'll now publish our code to this function app. If I just open this function app, so we can see that right now there won't be any functions inside it. So if I just go on to functions, so it says that no results have been found. So what I'll do is I'll publish the code that we have created earlier to this function app, and then we'll see the results over here. So for publishing the code, what we have to do is initially we have to connect with the Azure subscription that we have. So here you can see that I have used the same email ID which I have used for creating the Azure subscription. Now if I just go to Solution Explorer, if I just right click on this, so you can see like we get a publish option over here. So once I click on the publish, so once we click on the publish, we'll get these options like whether you have to publish to Azure or a Docker container registry, or you want to import a profile or folder, right? So for now we want to directly publish it to Azure portal and on the function app that we have created. So I just click on the Azure. Then it asks whether you want to publish it to which type of function app, right? Whether it's Windows, Linux, or whether it's container based. So if you remember, we have selected the code option over there, and we have selected Windows option for the operating system. So we'll click on the Windows. Okay, so now it says that this is your, it gives us the details like this is your subscription, this is your resource group, Azure Day, and this is the function app onto which you have to publish or not. So once we click on the finish, we'll get an option to publish the code. So we will get a option to publish. So once we click on the publish, it will package our code and deploy it onto Azure Function app. So once this is deployed, what we'll do is we'll go to Azure portal and then we'll check whether the function this function that we have created appears in the Azure Function app or not. So now if we just check it, so the publish has been successful. So we'll just go to Azure portal and check. So if we now just check the Azure Function app, we'll see the function one over here. And to test this, whether this is working or not, what I'll do is I'll click on this. So on top, we have an option to get the function URL. I'll get this, I'll copy this, and I'll paste it in the browser. So it says that hello from the Azure div. So application is up and running and it's working successfully. Even if you want to check like what is the trigger that we have used and what is the workflow, so you can go to integration and you will see that there is an HTTP trigger that is actually calling a function app and there is no output. Let's say for example, if you want to give the output to the storage account or any other service, right? So you can add a service as well over here. So what we will do is we will now we have already triggered the function app, so we should be able to see these details in the application insights as well. Let's go to application insights. I'll again go to Azure resource group. If I just go to this application insights, so I should see the server request. Now there are two server requests that have been made for this function app. So if I just click on any one of them, so let's take this duration. So we can see whether this is like a successful fail. So we'll get an operation name over here. Operation name is a function name and how much time it has taken. What is the count? What is the number of time it has been triggered? So if you click on this, you will get more insights. Again, there is an application map and there are many things available with the application insights itself. You can also create alerts, like if there are some errors and you want it to be alerted, right? So you can just create alerts based on the fail count. Again, if you just click on the application map, so it will give you a nice overview like how much time your function app has been called. So again, this is what we get over here. And let's say your function app is using some other service like Cosmos DB, then you will see the connection like this function app is calling the Cosmos DB and this Cosmos DB is storing the data and again sending a response back to, let's say, instance one. Just for an example I'm saying. So this is something which we will get in the application map, like which resource is communicating to which resource. It will be a nice graphical presentation of it. Again, if I just go to function app, so there are a few things which I wanted to tell you. Okay, so if I just go to function app again, so if you want to have some environment variables with your function app, what you can do is you can go to configuration. So once you see this configuration, right, you will see some environment variables over here that can be directly used in the function app. So these are the environment variables that are available as of now. Again, these are the function runtime settings and general settings available over here. Okay, this is about the function app. So right now what we have done is we have created a function app which will only be able to run small tasks. Let's say for example you have some requirement where you want your job to run for, or your function app to run for, let's say 30 minutes, right? So you won't be able to do that with the code that we have written as of now. So there are some different patterns that are available within Azure Function app, which will enable us to write a long running application and also make it stateful, that are nothing but durable functions. So in demo, I won't be able to cover durable function as of now, but I will give you a brief overview of it. So the main use case for using a durable function is, let's say you have a long running application. That's a 30 minutes or 60 minutes. In that case, you can use the durable function apps. And again, let's say you want to have a mechanism where you could implement some design patterns like scale in or scale out, right? So these are some patterns that you can directly use with new Azure Function app. And durable functions also make your application stateful, so you can maintain the state of your application. Otherwise, if you just don't use durable functions, then you won't be able to maintain the state of the application. And the durable functions are actually storing the data. How they maintain the state is they store the data temporarily into storage accounts. So whenever your functions get invoked, it will actually see like what data it is getting. It will store that into storage account. Then it will call another function, and this is how durable functions work. So they persist the data into storage account, uh, which makes your application a stateful application. If you want, you can read out more on durable functions, but this is good to get started with the Azure Function app. Thank you guys for attending this session. If you have any queries or any doubts, you can reach me out at this email. Once again, thank you.